or they start reverting back to, you start to go, like one word for me that I just do not like is sure. Because most of the time to me, what sure means is that I don't care, or I'm not excited about it, or something along those lines. So when someone tells me sure, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try a different route. Now, sometimes, not everybody has the same view.
Hi, I'm Kyle Werkerly, Certified Professional Ghostwriter. I'm glad you're listening as I welcome industry experts to share stories. You'll hear of lessons learned the hard way, overcoming professional hurdles, turning experience into actionable knowledge, and how to connect with your target audience. This is the Career Challenges Podcast. Welcome to the Career Challenges Podcast, and my guest for this episode is Marquez Mosher. And Marquez Mosher sees the world a bit differently. He has a unique personality that allows him to perceive and understand situations from multiple points of view. It's a trait he has spent his professional career, as well as his personal life, constantly cultivating. Now he wants to use it to help you, and he's going to use it to help me get through this episode. So, Marquez, welcome to the Career Challenges Podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So, Marquez, I find it interesting that you actually are from somewhere where I actually used to live. You're outside of Sacramento, is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes. I grew up actually in Eureka, California. Okay. So, so I have some history in that area. I've got some friends who live in the Davis area as well and work for, either they used to work for UC Davis and now they're working for the California Department of Game and Fish. So all that exciting stuff happening there.
Yeah, so, that sounds about right for Eureka, Davis, and yep.
Definitely. So you're a consultant, that's correct?
Yes. It's a broad term because
true. Yeah, there's a lot of people they go by consultant, but a consultant for this niche, consultant for that niche, or a specific process that they're always trying to help other organizations implement. So, what kind of superpower is your consultancy?
I started out with general kind of business because that was my experience, and then a couple years ago, as my kids were getting older, I started to get more into personal development, business development, and I realized that my experiences in my life and my personality lent itself very easily to it. The perspective part. Sometimes I just refer to myself as kind of a perspective specialist because everything I seem to do is always thinking about another angle, another viewpoint, and whether it's a couple steps forward. It's just hard for me not to just be and just kind of see something one way. And that actually is pretty helpful when you're dealing with other people who don't necessarily have that, because we're not really taught, trained, or even raised to see things in multiple perspectives. It's usually very much this is stay in your lane, this is what you do, this is how you are. And that, that to me, that would kill me. It leads to complacency, and that just is one thing that most people don't even realize they're in. Mm-hmm. So I can kind of help them out. And it also applies for businesses because usually businesses are extensions of whoever the boss is, whoever's in charge, whoever's making the decision. So my consultant now has become more of a development consultant because it just helps develop whether it's a business or improve the situation or laying the groundwork for the future. So it's kind of hard to nail down, but it's once I usually have a conversation with someone, they go, "Oh, I see," and then it kind of falls into place. So
yeah, I find having that elevator pitch down really helps, but also just kind of a quick little blurb, it goes right like this, and having that explanation down really helps. And so I completely understand, when people are like, "So what does that mean?" Like, well, and then you get to kind of explain more, which is always nice. So is there a specific kind of industry that you find yourself really helping out more than others?
It finds, interestingly enough, I've hit a point where, as I talk about it, I'm like, I'm not old, but I'm not young. Yeah. And so it works out really well that to me, age is just a number. So I find myself gravitating towards newer experiences. And a lot of times it's startups or people that are just trying to see whether or not they would be good as an entrepreneur, whether they would want to try something different. And I find that seems to be more of the arena that I'm in. And hand in hand, that a lot of time that goes in with on the personal side with lots of people that are kind of at the same point where they realize they can do something different, but they're not sure what. And bringing a different perspective comes along. I come along and kind of go, well, did you consider this? Or since you like this, did you ever think about that? And a lot of times the conversation evolves into, I didn't think about that, but yes, that would be a great way for me to, and then so on and so forth, and it goes down. So I really just want to kind of jog people out of whatever rut they're in. And a lot of times it's already there. Business owners, or even as just our personal lives, we kind of know instinctively what we want to do or where to go, but we're not necessarily clear on it. So just giving that nudge kind of helps people go, oh, that's what I needed. And then it goes from there. So it's always seems to be in that change arena, whether it's startup businesses or whether it's someone who's just trying to look to do something different in their personal lives.
Yeah. And I know you probably don't want to say it's a set process, but is there kind of a process that you follow for each individual?
To a degree, it is. Mainly, it's just kind of like my personality. But a lot of times, it's that initial conversation. And with as many things as I've done in my background and my experience, normally that leads to something else. Where maybe they worked in real estate, and I have experience in real estate, or it was maybe even the auto business or something like that. And then all of a sudden we start talking about that, and I get to know them a little bit better, and that starts the process. And after that, then it becomes a little bit more set, where it's kind of like, okay, well, what's your time frames? What are you looking to do? How much of a change are you looking to make? How much risk are you willing to take? And then it kind of goes from there. But the key part is that first conversation or two when they're trying to figure out, can this guy really help me? And I'm kind of thinking, can I really help them? Yeah. So it goes both ways. And then after that, it becomes somewhat more of a set process, which, I have a challenge experience kind of thing, which is for the personal development side, but it can be modified for businesses. I call it more of a show and go. I start the process, get someone going, and then usually I may step out of it and have an accountability person step in. Someone who's more trained in an actual accountability partner. And they're the ones that kind of keep them on track to where they want to go. And then I kind of come in and out of that situation as needed for, pushing mindset perspective. It's a little bit different than some other consultants, coaches, whatever you want to call them, because a lot of times they like to have that control. But I actually like stepping in, kind of pushing it, and then stepping to the side. I don't need to be the focus. I don't want to be the focus. Mm-hmm. And quite honestly, other people do it better. The accountability stuff, that there's other people out there that do it. That's all they do, and they're very good at it. So I'll let them do it.
Awesome. So with the organization, is the process similar, or is it more complicated because you're dealing with multiple people this time?
With I think with organizations it's a little bit simpler, but that's probably because it's a little more structured. Mm-hmm. I also know that there's going to be limitations to what they can do. There's parameters, whether they're just financial, whether or not there's just logistics. So those ones are almost a little bit more of the process because I already know the limitations that are there. On the personal side, there really isn't, other than what your life constraints are, whether you have kids, what your job is and stuff. But those are relatively few. And then you have lots of time on what you're going to do outside of that. And everybody also can rearrange that depending on how aggressive they want to be with their change. Then they may be more willing to put in more time. When it's an organization, it's usually set. It's pretty much, here's your time frame. This is what we want to do. This is how much we want to do for this quarter. This is how much we want to do for next quarter, and so on and so forth. So, the organizations is much more of a set process, whereas personal is a little bit more free flow.
Awesome. So with you living in the Sacramento area of California, do you find most of your clients in that area, or are they all over?
Generally all over. A lot of this is done because obviously you can do with technology, things can be done remotely. It's less and less of the one-on-one in person, and much more of a utilization of like Zoom, video conferencing, calls. So much can also just be done. A lot of times it's reassurance. So a lot of times it's just a text, it's an email message, messaging or some sort. So it's all over. For some reason, I also seem to have a lot of contacts in like Australia and kind of on that side. And I don't know what it is, but there just seems a lot of a lot of the contacts, Facebook, Instagram and stuff. I have a lot of conversations with people going, hey, I had this idea. And it's interesting how much time I actually just end up doing with somebody asking, hey, I just wanted your opinion on something. And it may or may not even develop into an actual client, but that's just as gratifying to me too, because most of the time I'll check in with them, later on at some point, and they took that and ran with it. And so, on one side, the business side is kind of like, rats, okay, that would have been nice to have more of a business relationship. But on the other hand, I'm lucky enough that my wife is the one who makes the bulk of the income for the household. So a lot of this ends up being kind of a passion project for me to be able to do things, and and that's kind of a nice place to be.
So with your quote unquote international clients, how do you handle kind of, them coming from a different background? I'm curious what your mindset is on that.
It took a little difference because I took some things for granted as far as the business world goes. And although, business is business, sales is sales, marketing is marketing, I mean, all of that stuff, it's just usually how you apply it and in the presentation. But some of the cultural things are obviously different. And whereas the personal development side of things whereas becoming such a huge industry, it's not quite the same, or is not quite as big outside of the United States. And so therefore, some of the things that we take for granted, the processes and such, aren't as evident. They see some things as, versus mindset and perspective. Some of those things are much more new and novel to them than what we think of. Or at least maybe, generally speaking, we're mainstream media is always kind of telling you, mindset this and positive that, and we kind of get inundated with that. And it's not necessarily the same all over.
Mm-hmm. You do this kind of consultancy for individuals and for organizations, but you also mentioned that you have kind of a passion project just helping people, and that's through your Facebook group. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually, it's the Think More, Care More, Live More. And it started off as part of the Vision Perspective group, but I kept struggling finding how to be able to do both. And I realized I couldn't. One needed to be separated out. And in fact, that's actually more of my attention and time is actually spent on that now than the other. But the Think More, Care More, Live More is kind of a philosophy. It's kind of a movement at some point, I would like it to be, of how to think about things. And it boils down to basically awareness, kindness, and action. That's the think, care, live. And a lot of people, when I say think more, I've had a lot of pushback on, no, we need to think less. We need to just be. We just need to, relax and chill. And I'm like, absolutely. But the think more is, before you get to that point, you have to be aware of why you need to just be, of why you need to just chill out. So the awareness part is self-awareness, situational awareness. And a lot of this is where they're simple concepts, but we overlook them. We take them for granted. And when I broke it down, I was trying to think of something as simple as, what could it just be? Think, care, live kind of came to mind. So that's what I ran with. And yes, that's my passion project. I could just keep talking about that one, because that's one of those things I just love to do. So.
Well, let's talk about it more. So, looking back over your life and your career, do you feel there's kind of a moment, or maybe a specific space in time where that came from, this passion project, or this idea came from, that became your passion project?
It was always there because it was the way I was raised, and even actually some of the teachers I had when I was younger. But it really crystallized when I became the parent, and my kids all pretty much were kind of in their teenage years. Because they're all very close. They're all within basically a 5-year span. There's 4 of them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
for kids.
So
Hey, hats off to you.
it was kind of like I always talk about. I had my own group like for 10 years. I had my own group all the time,
Mhm.
and essentially I was trying to, teach them to basically be aware of things and to think about things and to care and to raise good people and and all that and yet to live and don't. I want you to go to college, but if you don't want to go to college, that's fine. I just want you to make sure you do something you're happy with. So it was that balance of all of those things, and I realized I'm like, this is something that a lot of people struggle with. There's a large argument now about whether college is worth it or not.
Mhm.
And you can get into whether or not, well, yeah, for some people it's absolutely necessary, but others, not really. I mean, maybe just a year or two would help them. And then you have the society going, well, no, 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 you have to get your degree. And that all goes into well, let's think about that. Let's
Yes.
actually decide on, is that situation, let's be aware of that situation and take it one by one. And then of course that leads into people casting the judgments. Oh, you didn't go to college or whatever the case is. It's like, well, maybe we could care a little more or a little less in some cases about those distinctions and what we're doing and just kind of look at each other as individuals and have that perspective and have empathy. So that was the care more part of it. And then the live more was like just doing it all, not to be afraid. Move
Mhm.
forward, walk through that door, ask for that raise that you wanted, not to be afraid to live. And when you say it out loud, think, care, live, it sounds like, again, kind of simple, but um, it's not. And that's the kind of thing now that I like to help people try to be able to live more. That's now what I do. I call it, do you want to live TCLM? Do you want
Mhm.
to think more, care more, live more? So that's my passion project. That's the bulk of what I'm trying to do and get out there now. So I
Mhm.
told you I could keep going. I'm gonna be
Awesome.
like I told you. It's I guess that's a good sign for a passion project, but
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, I am part of the Think More, Care More, Live More group, and I've been enjoying the posts. They've been a huge help to me. So props there. Um, but also, over the course of getting this up and going, it's easy to assume, well, because it's his passion project, any obstacle he's come up against, it should have been easily surmountable because he just had so much passion, he would just jump right over it. So has it been easy or has it been challenging? And what have been
uh,
the challenges?
it's interesting because the challenges started with me trying to identify what exactly I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And although a couple years ago when I started the Vision Perspective Group, I think I knew that this was kind of what I wanted to do, the think more, care more, live more. But on the other hand, I was still so much business oriented, I realized I didn't necessarily want some of my experience to go to waste. So I was trying to integrate the two and have that philosophy for businesses. And I realized that there was an internal struggle going on. And that was what I had to kind of back off and go, no, these are really two separate entities between the two. And like anything else with the TCLM, I look at it and go, well, geez, you've got these other thought processes and these other movements or these other philosophies, trying to get it. How am I going to break through? How am I going to be able to, have mine stand out? And I had to kind of take a few steps back and just go, you know what? I'm not in this for the short term. This is a long term thing. So slowly but surely, I'm just going to build it up, like the group, social media. The next couple things I'm going to start is I've got the basics for a book that kind of incorporates this. So those who want to learn about it or kind of live it that way, and then possibly even switching to the other side of this and doing the podcast so that people could actually have almost like a radio show so that people have questions and people want to talk about it. And I realized that all takes time. That all takes time. It all takes kind of planning. And
Mm-hmm.
so those obstacles were very difficult for me to realize I'm going to have to slow down. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to have to wait this out and just kind of keep moving slowly but surely. And that can be frustrating, especially when you have something that's a passion because you just, want to get to the mountaintop and scream it out and all that kind of stuff. But that's not the way it works.
Not at all. Not at all. So you had mentioned doing a podcast, and I've seen you've been on other podcasts. So have those experiences been for you, being on other podcasts?
They're very good because it helps actually almost every conversation I have, and this one included, it helps clarify some point that in my mind I was bouncing around 4 different versions. That is by far the problem that I have, that I know I have, is that because I'm so in tune to seeing things from different perspectives and different point of views, I miss a lot of things that are right there in front of me. Sometimes while there isn't always just one way to do things, sometimes there is a better way to do things. And I have to pull back and realize, you know what, I may have found it. And this is something to tell the other people, is that you can keep looking for something, but at some point you're going to find a way that's actually really good. And the key is to understand and realize you found it. There's no more looking. You can always kind of just keep it, maybe just keep an eye out. But the reality is you found the best way, or at least the best way at that moment. So stop looking and move forward. And I had to do the same thing for myself. So I look at it. My son and I, my oldest son, we usually have very good conversations and very good dialogue. So I think the idea that I'll be using with the podcast is something that's a little bit different, because normally it's a solo host. And it might be more, yes, I'll be the host, but you'll be kind of a co-host, because the two of us, when we have conversations, they start to get going. We start to get into them. We can joke with each other. So it might, that's what I'm thinking will happen. So it may be a little bit different than the traditional ones, but learning from you guys that actually do it is that's the best experience you can have. So.
Sure. Well, I'm also finding I'm learning a lot just by doing. I read a lot, obviously, before I launched this podcast, but of course, over the course of just the first 10 that I produced before I went live with the podcast, I feel I learned so much more in those 10 than I did in all the research that I did prior to that. True, and I kicked around the idea for a long time. I probably should have pulled the trigger a lot sooner than I did, but at the same time, it's like, well, better now than never.
Yeah,
you're only as young as you are today. So you're doing podcasts. You're kicking around the idea of a book too. Do you also do speaking engagements? Would you like to be a guest on the Career Challenges podcast? Go to careerchallengespodcast.com to find out how. While you're there, check out other episodes and download them through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Castbox, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more. The Career Challenges podcast is hosted by me, Kyle Weckerly. I'm a certified professional ghostwriter who works with business thought leaders and industry experts to write polished manuscripts, assess their publishing options, and create book marketing plans. I've worked with consultants, high-ticket salespeople, coaches, speakers, C-level executives, and business owners. My authors have worked for USAA, Vistage, Booz Allen Hamilton, Austin Technology Council, and the John Maxwell team. My authors want to write a book to serve as a platform for their marketing endeavors. They know that becoming an author will help them secure speaking gigs, market their expertise, promote a product or service, and more. Are you ready to turn your experience, knowledge, and stories into actionable advice and connect with your ideal client? Then visit WeckerlyWriter.com to schedule a consultation today and begin your publishing journey. That's WeckerlyWriter.com. WeckerlyWriter.com. And now, back to the Career Challenges podcast.
Interestingly enough, I don't. I have, and I actually absolutely. I guess I should qualify that. The traditional sense of speaking engagements and stuff, the TCLM doesn't necessarily lend itself as well to that, as much as it is much more of a Q&A town hall kind of thing. So I do try to speak, and I try to do it more in smaller settings. Now, unfortunately, that may have to be revisited, because obviously the more traditional speaking and the larger audiences, you obviously impact and touch more. So that's kind of something that I have to revisit. Some of it is purely just the fact that I'm much more of a free speaker as opposed to someone who's usually with a set script. So I probably have to get myself put my own self a mindset and perspective to say, okay, this is what you're going to need to do if you want to keep pushing the TCLM forward. But I really enjoy just kind of, like I said, the small groups, because then it's basically a little bit of who it is, and then it's a question of, so who's got a question? Or do you understand what this means? Or do you need clarification? And inevitably someone has something, and then it goes from there. And then it becomes, oh, you were actually that. Well, let me tell you. And then my experiences kick in, and that whole thing that I said earlier about kind of that conversation starts all over. And that's, which is, that works out really well, but it cannot do that at scale. That is not something you can do, or it's very, very difficult to do in a large setting.
Yes, I understand. Yeah, definitely. So, which would you prefer? I mean, where is your heart really at? Working more with the small groups or talking to larger groups?
Okay, being completely honest with myself, I would say that I would say the small groups, but some of that could very well be just the fear of knowing what I have to do in order to get in front of the big groups. So I'm very aware of the things that I don't like, and I try to be, at least. I think ultimately, though, I really do like having the one-on-one conversations. So the small groups, but I battle with the fact that that's not the best business policy or business strategy. It's not the best business model, because it's easier to try to get in front of large groups and then be able to answer questions in breakout sessions or afterwards, as opposed to, I feel so much more comfortable when I'm walking into, I don't even necessarily don't have to, I don't even know I have to know what the group's about, as long as they say, we just wanted to hear from you. And I'm like, I'm one of those people that can walk in and go, okay, what are we going to talk about? And this is how I feel. This is what where I come from, and go with it. And so again, that's not something you can do in a large group. When you're doing it as a big audience, they don't want you to do that. You need to know who your audience is. You need to know what is going to be the topics. What is the theme of the presentation, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all fine and good, but you lose some of that spontaneity, and that's the part I really enjoy. So
awesome. Yeah, well, I love the spontaneity too. I really enjoy how conversations like this one can take on a life of their own, and I really enjoy that, which I do much better one-to-one. I'm more of an introvert that way. So there's a good question. Would you refer to yourself more as an extrovert or an introvert?
I with that conversation, because that's another kind of hot topic about introvert, extrovert, empath, and all that stuff. I coined the term social loner. I shouldn't say I coined it. I mean, it was out there, but I use it and apply it to myself. I call myself, basically, when somebody asks me to describe myself, I say I am an eternal optimist, hopeless romantic, dream thinking realist, and a social loner. And those last two always get people going, what is that? The social loner part means that I could be just as happy reading a book by myself. I used to ride motorcycles, so taking a ride. I'm just as happy doing that as I am being in the middle, say, of a party and talking it up and all that kind of stuff. In fact, I when we do the social scene, like my wife and I or something, we both are the point where it's like batteries. Okay, here we go. We're fully charged and we're out there and we're talking and stuff. And then at some point we're like, okay, you'll find me over playing with the dog. I'll be in the corner. I'll step outside. And because it's kind of like, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I don't need to do any more socializing, no more adulting. So that's why I call it a social loner, because I'm probably a loner at heart, but I have no problems being social when it's necessary or when I want to be. And then that's why it's kind of hard. I think some people call it an extroverted introvert or something like that.
Oh yeah. I remember in college, I took all these different personality tests just, for jobs and classes that I was in. And I hated them because they always said something different. And one test said I was an introverted extrovert. And then another test right after that said I was an extroverted introvert. I was like,
yep.
That
exactly.
makes no sense.
You nailed it, because I've had to do those things too. And recently I had one where the people saw it, the management had seen it, that worked with my wife, and they're like, this isn't your husband, the way the description was, because they knew me outside of it. And she goes, I know. Depending on how he wants to answer those questions, you will get a different answer on every personality test, because that's like you just said. Sometimes the answers you give on that moment in that day, well, they may be true. They're probably true, but you didn't necessarily feel that way the next day. And then you get two different personality tests. And it does bring into question a lot of times of like, well, how accurate are they? Although they're accurate, they're just, you can't say that they're the only way of determining someone's personality.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always come back to this story as well. When I was in high school, my sister read the DISC, a book about the
Yep.
DISC. I can't remember exactly what philosophy that came out of, but she asked me some questions, and she goes, well, you're an I personality. You're very goal oriented or task oriented. Things have to be structured for you. You're analytical and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, that's good to know. How does this help me? But then I felt she used that as an excuse for not, listening to me, or, if I said, this is bothering, she goes, oh, well, you're just an I personality. Like it was my fault that I was this way. And, that just frustrated me. And so I feel that that's tainted me from now on, because I was speaking with another guest, Brian Benavides, and he does a lot of these personality tests kind of approaches to helping his clients. And, I was kind of like, well, I'm not really sure. And he had a really great argument for it, is that, with these tests, he's able to really help people within the group understand each other from multiple perspectives, like you do, but also to help them understand that even though it is, this test does say something about your personality, that just means there's room for change. That does not have to define you. And everyone else within the group needs to understand that as well. And so, of course, at the time, I don't feel my sister had done that. I didn't have that mindset either. And so, it's hard for me. That's an obstacle that I have to overcome when I get to those personality test things, because I'm like, is this really accurate, or is it just my mindset in the moment of taking the test?
Yeah, exactly. It's because my degree that I got a long time ago is in marketing, and a lot of the stuff that I did with sales and marketing, and just meeting as many people as I have. The demographics is absolutely a real thing, and patterns, human nature is definitely a real thing. So a lot of times, if you understand those, or just understand that they are real, that makes things a little bit easier, because if you go to the other extreme and you try to say everybody's an individual and everybody has their own way of doing stuff, and generally that's just not true. Everybody is an individual, but chunks and chunks and chunks of people do something the same way, and other chunks and chunks and chunks of people do something another way. And you can slice it down as much as you want. But like your guess was, it's kind of like, but if you recognize that, it helps you kind of go through. You just got to make sure, though, that in case you're wrong, or in case you're going down the wrong road, you got to turn around real quick, because obviously, that you're probably doing nobody any good at that point. So
yeah. So do you have any examples of a good way to analyze the situation, so if I'm going the wrong way, or if I'm interpreting this person's personality in a way that's not necessarily true to them?
Sort of. A lot of times that ends up being just the reactions. If you ask certain questions, or you bring up certain ideas or certain possibilities, and there's more of an excitement, you start to realize certain things, the way the person reacts, really. It gives you a good idea that, wait, they didn't react the same. Or they start reverting back to, you start to go, like, one word for me that I just do not like is sure. Because most of the time, to me, what sure means is that I don't care, or I'm not excited about it, or something along those lines. So when someone tells me sure, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try a different route. Now, sometimes, not everybody has the same view of the word sure, but that's just,
sure. Yeah.
Most likely it's not a yes, I like that, or no, I don't really want to go there. Sure. It's like a shrug of the shoulders.
Yeah. Or it's like the word fine.
Yeah.
How are you today? I'm fine. Really? Really? Or,
Yeah,
you know, the classic example, you ask your wife, are you okay? I'm fine. Oh, no. Oh, no, no.
exactly.
Yeah.
Fine and short. And you're absolutely right. Those two words are just like, they're so nondescript. They just have nothing attached to them. So it's those, when you start seeing those signs, because again, you've met enough people, if you've been in enough situations, patterns emerge. And if someone who's normally willing to say, oh, I like that, or, oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah, let's try that. Or tell me more about that. And they just go, sure. That's a red flag of going, okay, maybe I didn't communicate it correctly, maybe I didn't present it correctly, or maybe it's not what they, or then again, maybe it wasn't received the way I thought it was. Anyway, it opens up all of those possibilities, and that's how you can tell maybe I'm going down the wrong road.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's very intuitive, so to speak. So that's the hard thing with sometimes being a consultant and doing the perspective mindset things, that a lot of it is at some point you kind of have to trust the person that you're asking their opinion. And if you don't, then it's kind of like, why are you asking for their opinion? Because you're probably not going to like it, or make up an excuse as to why you don't like it, or you're not going to use it, and then you're just wasting. Everybody's just wasting their time. So.
Mhm. Sure. Sure. So, kind of stepping back and taking a different course here with the conversation. So, say somebody's listening to this interview and they're like, "Oh, I really love what Marquez is doing, and his vision and where he's going. I kind of want to follow in his footsteps." So, what would be advice for somebody wanting to do what you do?
Um, I would make sure that they're the self awareness of themselves,
Mm-hmm.
because first and foremost, that's part of that thing when I said earlier about I'm not old, but I'm not young. That part makes a big difference, and it doesn't matter how old you are, because the experiences I had all of the quote unquote major life experiences before I was 30, including like a death of a parent and so on and so forth. So that was a real, it's not, how many, was they always talk about not how many miles are on the tire, it's the wear.
Yeah.
That was exactly it. So no matter what age you are, you just have to make sure that you are really aware of who you are, whether, your strengths, your weaknesses, your ability to actually go, that is a weakness and I have to work on it, or at least be aware of it. Because unless you know yourself really well, you're not going to be able to trust yourself in order to help someone else. I don't attach any sort of age or anything like that, because you can be 25 years old, and you've gone through so much life experience that you know more than a 60-year-old. But that would be my advice. That would be kind of like, you have to know yourself really well and be able to not only be confident enough to come across as somewhat egotistical, which I have more than my share of accusations of, but also to realize that, yeah, I'm okay with that, because I also know that I got to work on this, or I have to work on that. It's a double-edged sword. A lot of things are basically in my life is like a double-edged sword, because they can cut both ways, and both ways usually end up being good. So.
True. True. So self-awareness, I do want to jump on that because you had mentioned it. Another guest that I had, Jeff Munn, he does consultancy, but he's incorporating meditation a lot with his clients and trying to get them to be aware of their own thoughts and what's going on within their own mind subconsciously. I kind of said that twice. Um, and so when he explained meditation to me, he had a really great example, is that you're just really observing your own thoughts as if they were clouds within your own mind. They're passing through. Oh, that's that thought. This is where it came from, and that's what could be affecting me positively or negatively. So, my question to you then, Marquez, what is self-awareness, and how do you define it?
Yeah, by the way, that description I've heard, and I think that's a really good one, the cloud kind of
Mm-hmm.
analogy. For me, self-awareness a lot of times is when you're presented with the choices of having to do something, and when you feel that anxiety or that pit in your stomach of something, when someone says, "Would you like to do this?" and you're thinking, I'm supposed to do this, but I really don't want to do this. That is an excellent time to sit back and reflect on, well, one, why don't I want to do this? And then the other one is, why am I being asked? Because both of those situations will give you some more clarity. And that part of self-awareness is what's key to me. I don't, at this point, I kind of like saying, I don't want to do, if there's something I don't want to do, I don't want to do it. I don't want to have to do it. And some points in your life, sometimes you have to do things that you don't really want to do in order to get where you really want to be. Mm-hmm. So that's the self-awareness that I talk about, that when you're basically trust your feelings, trust your intuition. When you start feeling anxiety, or when you feel like, something that should be a really nice invitation, or opportunity, but you're hesitant, why is that? And kind of like the meditation is to step back and think about, well, it's because it's going to take me away from my kids. Yes, I would make more money, but is that extra money worth it towards my kids? And then that helps you decide on, well, what trade-offs are you willing to have, and what's more important to you? And that kind of comes back to a more conscious level of a self-awareness. But needless to say, it gives you an insight into who you are, because sometimes, if your priorities change obviously over time, and what you thought you really wanted, say 5 years ago, may not be the same now. Have you realized that? Have you realized that what you wanted 5 years ago is no longer what you want? I sometimes struggle with that, because as much as I would want to get the TCLM out there and get that message out there, I also have a lot of times where I'm like, I don't want to do anything but hang out with my wife, and we're going to go on a cruise. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, so I got to fight the guilty feelings that, well, I just took 5 days off where I'm not really doing anything, but that's okay, because technically I'm all right with that. But you have to come to peace with that. And that's something that a lot of times, that internal struggle is very hard for people, because especially when you add in what the society says you're supposed to do. And that part is what really messes up the self-awareness. And the meditation helps you get back to that. The recognizing your own internal feelings, as far as headache, stress, that knot in your stomach, your procrastination, the reason you keep making up excuses not to do something. All of that is telling you, hey, there's something going on, and you need to be able to figure out what that is. So, it can be a very interesting challenge, but that's, you have to have it. If you don't, you will consistently be told what to do, and someone else will be telling you how to live your life. And that inevitably leads to, I always talk about either complacency, unhappiness, whatever you want to call it, but you see it all around you. I mean, every one of us can look around and go, that person's not happy.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, true. And that's always hard to have that conversation with somebody. And I remember people talking to me, and they're like, "How you seem unhappy?" It's like, yeah, what do you want to do about it? Like, let me be miserable. And then realizing, okay, they genuinely care. I got to stop, just moping around, and got to start being happy now, and making a conscious choice. So making that conscious choice. I totally agree with that. So then, Marquez, what's next for you? What's on the horizon for you and your business, or you and your consultancy?
Right now, it's focused on basically getting more and more. I'm building the group for the Facebook group, that part of that one aspect. That social media is kind of the one pillar of that. These interviews, these podcasts is another one to kind of just reach other people. And ultimately, I will put out, the ideas between like the book and stuff. It's just a slow process of slowly but surely just touching, making friends, making contacts, making associates, and keep it moving forward. Is really all I'm looking to do. And in the meantime, when someone on the business side or organization side, the vision perspective stuff is so second nature to me. It's very easy for me to be able to go, okay, I'm going to take out a chunk of time to help this person or help this organization. But in the meantime, my goal is to help people kind of one-on-one. And I structure it, for me, I kind of structure it as support plans, where there's just different levels of saying, okay, you just want to kind of have an interaction with me? Great. Okay, there's this plan. Okay, you want to actually have a little bit more accountability, a little bit more face-to-face? There's this plan. And so there's kind of like a few tiers like that. Mainly, it's almost as if you're for lack of a better word, you're kind of buying a friend. That's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah.
But then again, that's what therapists have been doing for years and years. So,
True.
well, it's not necessarily trained as a therapist, but I can be, trained in the sense of, okay, this is where you want to go. I can help you improve your situation. I can help you lay the groundwork for the future, because I have been there and I have done that. So.
Awesome. So what was the name of your group again? I just want to make sure that's clear for everyone listening.
The group is Vision. Well, the business side of things is Vision Perspective. Mm-hmm. But on Facebook, like you were talking about, it's Think More, Care More, Live More project, or the Think More, Care More, Live More group. But yeah, and of course, websites, same thing, visionperspective.com, thinkcarelive.com. So.
Awesome. And so, I guess, are you trying to reach a specific type of person with these groups, or is it really just anybody you feel would like your help?
It's essentially, I think there isn't any type at all. What it ends up being is someone it resonating with someone. That's the kind of person, and that's not, I won't necessarily know or be able to target people that it's going to resonate with. I just have to almost do it as here's the philosophy, here's how I believe, or this is what I believe, this is how I believe you can live a better life, kind of thing. If that intrigues you, if that sounds interesting, I can help you do it. And that's where it goes. It's from a business side of things, it's very difficult because there is no target audience. There is no quote unquote niche. It is just basically saying, here I am, this is who I am, this is what I believe. Do you like it? If you do, I know it can help you, and go from there. Yeah, it's a little bit different.
I understand. Awesome. So Marquez, thank you so much for being on the Career Challenges podcast with me today.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to the Career Challenges podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and like the Career Challenges podcast on your favorite podcasting app. Visit careerchallengespodcast.com for more information. Schedule your free consultation with Kyle Weckerly by visiting weckerlywriter.com today. That's WECKERLYWRITER.com. Thank you.